Good evening, everyone, and welcome to True Scary Stories. Tonight's story is called Unmarked Grave. I own a house that sits on a fair-sized lot. The backyard extends 150 feet with a small, thin wood at the very rear. A century-old cemetery lies beyond the trees. My next-door neighbor thinks it's creepy, but I find it tranquil, especially around dusk. I've never visited the graveyard, but witnessed funeral processions wind along the road separating my lot from the rows of tombstones. I overheard a burial while doing some yard work one Saturday morning. Vandals damaged the cemetery several times in the past decade. Teenagers, bored and drunk on Friday nights, were the culprits in most instances. They spray-painted casket vaults, cracked headstones with sledgehammers, and once even dug up a plot. The local judge would fine them $100 and 50 hours of community service, preventing similar acts for 2 or 3 more years at least. I woke up after 1 a.m. the night before last Halloween. I believe the kids still call it Devil's Night. I felt anxious and unsettled, like I had forgotten something. The trash wasn't out. I put on my house coat and slippers, since my street was one of the first to have its garbage collected. I walked out back to the trash cans. A bright light shone through the trees, accompanied by a low hum of machinery. Both emanated from the cemetery. This made little sense as the cemetery's maintenance crews and gravediggers worked during the day. I exchanged my slippers for work boots and walked towards the graveyard. I entered the woods hoping to garner a look, but caused a branch to crack with a step. The light shut off, and the hum rose overhead, dissipating into the night sky. I ensured the commotion didn't return, then finished my chores before returning to bed. I was in the backyard the following day when I noticed the cemetery's maintenance crew. Curious, I stepped through the timbers and across the drive to say hello. I introduced myself and described the preceding night's events. It turned out to be a coincidence. The crew was tending to the turf, covering several plots where the light had shone. It appeared sun-scorched, peculiar since the number of daylight hours had been few and the temperatures low for weeks. The crew chief asked me to tell them if anything else peculiar were to occur. The same uneasy feeling woke me again that night. I had completed all my chores, however. My bedroom window revealed the return of the cemetery light. I opened the window to determine if the hum was back. It was. I avoided all branches walking through the woods this time. A tree at the wood's edge hid me as I gathered my thoughts before peeking around it. 2 gray, child-sized beings stood under a spotlight. They looked to be operating an electronic device. A prong extended from the machine into the ground. I looked up to an immense vehicle hovering high in the air, shining the light on the creatures. It appeared to be metallic, but I was unsure because it was so dark. My body froze. My mind struggled to process the sight. I wondered if I was still sleeping. This was a nightmare constructed from my memories of all the evening's trick-or-treaters, perhaps. I would wake up soon. The humanoids stepped into the shadows. The ship's hum intensified. A stream of soil flowed up the beam and into the craft. My jaw dropped as a dilapidated coffin followed the dirt into the ship's hull. The soil then shot out of the ship, returning to where it first lay. Both beings stepped back into the light and levitated out of my sight. The beam's circumference then grew, encompassing 15 or 20 headstones. Its light intensified, causing the ground to smolder. The beam rotated upward without warning, shifting into the woods. I pulled my head behind the tree and turned my body, leaning back against it. I could feel the earth and air around me warm. The temperature increased to an unbearable degree. The clumps of leaves close by smoldered before bursting into tiny bonfires. I pleaded with my legs to sprint back home, but they failed to cooperate. Suction cup steps taken in my direction traversed the drive's pavement. 2 distinct shadows appeared at the sides of my tree, growing longer with each passing second. The smoke produced by the burning leaves engulfed me, making it near impossible to see. I imagined the creatures were close. The thought of capture was enough to prompt my exit from the immediate area and hoped the smoke would provide adequate cover for my retreat. I ran back home, locking the door behind me. Every one of the house's doors and windows soon followed suit. I looked out my bedroom window. The light was gone, the fire's out. I cracked open the window to find the hum gone too. I can't remember how long I sat on the bed, thinking about the events that had transpired. Flights of fancy never consume me, and I consider myself to be a sane person. Still, I could not bring myself to believe what I had witnessed and didn't sleep a wink. The cemetery's maintenance crew was back the next morning. I hurried over, hoping for a reasonable explanation or evidence that I was not crazy. I spoke to the crew chief again. Wary of being labeled a lunatic, I didn't disclose every detail, only that I experienced the light and hum again. I also professed to having seen an aircraft hovering above the cemetery, though I couldn't be positive due to the darkness. Maybe it was a UFO, I said before giving a slight chuckle. Now that would really be a coincidence, the crew chief said. Why is that, I asked. You see this unmarked grave? Well, the story goes that there ain't no man buried there. Legend has it that back in the early part of the previous century, some kind of vehicle fell from the sky and landed. Well, it crashed right about where your property is. Supposedly, there wasn't much left of the vehicle or its driver. They put everything in a coffin and buried it in this plot. Are you pulling my leg? I asked. No, but then again, it's only a legend, he said. We spoke for a few more minutes, but I got the distinct impression that the crew chief believed I was the one responsible for all the trouble. I wished him a good day and went back home. Ever since that night, every once in a blue moon, I have the same nightmare. I wake up in the middle of the night, paralyzed with fear, sensing someone or something is in the house. I notice the entire outside is illuminated by a bright light. Suction cup steps walk down the hall towards my bedroom. I then find myself lying on a metal table in a white room, like an operating theater at a university or hospital. Hundreds of strange gray beings, like the ones I saw at the cemetery, are sitting in the theater as I'm poked and prodded with a variety of instruments. Some are blunt, others are sharp. I'm never sure who or what is examining me. It's horrifying. I wake up in bed, lying in a cold sweat. Sometimes, when I go to the bathroom for a glass of water, I'll look in the mirror and see bruises or red marks I've never noticed before. I think back to that Halloween night in the cemetery and wonder if... But no, it's only a legend.